And then he says something very interesting about conservatives and liberals. Think about this. Men are conservatives when they are least vigorous or when they are most luxurious. They're conservatives after dinner or before taking their rest, when they're sick or aged, in the morning, or when their intellect or their conscience has been aroused. When they hear music or when they read poetry, they are radicals. In other words, the argument here, and I don't think he's speaking about conservative politics versus liberal politics. I think what he's saying is that we grow comfortable in ruts and in rhythms that we're so accustomed to. We have to be awakened from that kind of thing. We have to come out of what Kant would call his dogmatic slumber and begin to look differently. By paragraph 24, he gives the great example of the great Bishop Berkeley, who's going to go on a mission trip, and his pals are trying to convince him otherwise. And when he speaks to them inspired language about what he's going to do as he goes off on his mission trip, they're all ready to join him. And for Emerson, this is a classic example. He continues in paragraph 24 by saying it this way: men in all ways are better than they seem. They like flattery for the moment, but they know the truth of their own. It is a foolish cowardice which keeps us from trusting them and speaking to them rude truth. They resent your honesty for an instant. They will thank you for it always. And we often point this out to teachers, right? Students might be angry at first when you point out to them what they need to learn, and yet ultimately they will be grateful for your honesty. They resent your honesty for an instant. They will thank you for it always. What is it we heavily wish of each other? Is it to be pleased and flattered? No. But to be convicted and exposed, to be shamed out of our nonsense of all kinds and made men of instead of ghosts and phantoms. We're weary of gliding ghost-like through the world like zombies, which is itself so slight and unreal. We crave a sense of reality, though it come in strokes of pain. We immediately think again of Plato's cave allegory of being dragged out into the light of the sun, knowledge. I explain so by this man-like love of truth, those excesses and errors into which souls of great vigor, but not equal insight, often fall. They feel the poverty at the bottom of all the seeming affluence of the world. He talks about the thin masquerade of the world. And then he finishes in paragraph 24 by talking about Caesar as a classic example. He says Caesar, who was ready to go out and conquer the whole world, was ready to sit down and talk with a priest in Egypt. And he said, I give it all up just to know the source of the Nile. In other words, for Emerson, this is this idea that Caesar was always wanting to learn something new. By paragraph 25, he makes an interesting observation. He says, the most important thing you can do in your life is to spend time, not with your equals, but with your superiors. When you're with your superiors, you then are somehow going to be improved. Dear to us are those who love us. The swift moments we spend with them are the compensation of a great deal of misery. They enlarge our life. But dearer are those who reject us as unworthy, for they add another life. They build a heaven before us, whereof we had not dreamed, and thereby supply to us new powers out of the recesses of the Spirit, and urge us to new and unattempted performances. Ball players will often say that while they hated it at the time, they loved the fact that a coach pushed them and said, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. You can do better. You can do better, right? And with that in mind, that's the superiors that we want to be around. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to be better. Not your equals and certainly not your lessers, Emerson will say. In paragraph 26, he says we need to be challenged by the reformer's voice. He says we desire to be made great. We desire to be touched with that fire which shall command this ice to stream and make our existence a benefit. If therefore we start objections to your project, O friend of the slave, a friend of the poor, or of the race, understand well it's because we wish to drive you, to drive us into your measures. We wish to hear ourselves confuted. We are haunted with a belief that we have a secret which it would highly advantage us to learn. We would force you to impart it to us, though it should bring us to prison or to worse extremity. And then he says it in paragraph 17, nothing shall warp me from the belief that every man is a lover of truth. There is no pure lie, no pure malignity in nature. The entertainment of the proposition of depravity is the last profligacy and profanation. There is no skepticism, no atheism but that. Could it be received into the common belief, suicide would unpeople the planet. In other words, this is his answer to the Hamlet question, to be or not to be. We have to believe. We have to have faith. He will say it, without that notion, there could be no understanding of justice even. He will even say that you should trust the American voter to vote right in paragraph 27, political hope. By paragraph 28, he says, don't worry if the churches don't support your reforms. Do it anyway. We think, of course, letter from a Birmingham jail, as we've said in another lecture. MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., is writing to clergymen who should be supporting him in his cause, those white clergymen, and they're not. It's a powerful reading for that very reason alone, if nothing else. By paragraph 29, he says it this way, it only needs that a just man should walk in our streets to make it appear how pitiful and inartificial a contrivance is our legislation. The man whose part is taken and who does not wait for society in anything has a power which society cannot choose but feel. We long for an individual who can live true reform, is what he's saying. By paragraph 30, he says it this way, and as a man is equal to the church and equal to the state, so is he equal to every other man. The disparities of power in men are superficial, and all frank and searching conversation in which a man lays himself open to his brother apprises each of their radical unity. When two persons sit and converse in thoroughly good understanding, the remark is sure to be made, see how we have disputed about words. This idea is that we really are closer than we know. We fight usually because of language. We have different kinds of understandings of that language. He finishes by saying, I believe it is the conviction of the purest men that the net amount of man in man does not much vary. Each is comparably superior to his companion in some faculty. We can all learn from each other. His want of skill in other directions has added to his fitness for his own work. Each seems to have some compensation yielded to him by his infirmity, and every hindrance operates as a concentration of his force. By paragraph 31, he says it. True reform begins with personal reform, or others will see the dishonesty. He will say it this way to kind of emphasize what we call epistemologically the fallibilist position. He says, what if I cannot answer your questions? I'm not pained if I cannot frame a reply to the question, what is the operation we call providence? There lies the unspoken thing, present, omnipresent. Every time we converse, we seek to translate it into speech, but whether we hit or whether we miss, we have the fact. Every discourse is an approximate answer, again the fallibilist position, but it is of small consequence that we do not get it into verbs and nouns while it abides for contemplation forever. The absolutist position, I'm right, you're wrong. The only problem with that is people fly airplanes into buildings and lots of people die. The opposite is the relativist position. There are no absolutes. The insanity of that position, the performative contradiction. It sounds like you're saying absolutely, you know there are no absolutes. What is left? The fallibilist position. This is the Emersonian position. It's the position of science. I may be right. I think I'm right. I could be wrong. So I'm always looking for more data to prove or disprove. That is to say, I'm not so quickly going to just shut down an argument. I'm going to listen. I need to listen. Paragraph 32, he says it. If the auguries of the prophesying heart shall make themselves good in time, the man shall be born whose advent men and events prepare and foreshow, is one who shall enjoy his connection with a higher life, with the man within man, shall destroy distrust by his trust, shall use his native but forgotten methods, shall not take counsel of flesh and blood, but shall rely on the law, capital L, alive and beautiful, which works over our heads and under our feet, pitiless. It avails itself of our success when we obey it, and of our ruin when we contravene it. Men are all secret believers in it, else the word justice would have no meaning. They believe that the best is the true, that right is done at last, or chaos would come. It rewards actions after their nature, and not after the design of the agent. Work this law, it saith to man, in every hour, paid or unpaid. See only that thou work, and thou canst not escape the reward. Whether thy work be fine or coarse, planting corn or writing epics, so only it be honest work, done to thine own appropriation. It shall earn a reward to these senses as well as to the thought. No matter how often defeated, you are born to victory. The reward of a thing well done is to have done it. You'll remember Teddy Roosevelt said there's no greater thing than to do work worth doing. And here's the Emerson position, and it's a powerful one, and I think it's challenging to us. If you really are interested in changing the world, Gandhi said it, the great reader of Emerson, be the change you wish to see in the world. In other words, you have to reform yourself first. That notion that true reform, again, begins with that fallibilist position. By paragraph 33, he says it this way: as soon as a man is wanted to look beyond surfaces and to see this high will prevails, without an exception or an interval, he settles himself into serenity. He can already rely on the laws of gravity, and every stone will fall where it is due. The good globe is faithful and carries us securely through the celestial spacious, anxious or resigned. We need not interfere to help it on, and he will learn one day the mild lesson they teach, that our own orbit is all our task, and we need not assist the administration of the universe. Now this will, of course, sound at times like he's saying we should leave these movements, like the abolitionist movement, alone and just worry about ourselves. Much has been debated about this, but most readers of Emerson will say that in the end, he really was an individual who was very much a believer in the movement of abolitionism. By paragraph 34, he says it this way: that which befits us, embosomed in beauty and wonder as we are, is cheerfulness and courage and the endeavor to realize our aspirations. The life of man is the true romance, which, when it is valiantly conducted, will yield the imagination a higher joy than any fiction. All around us, what powers are wrapped up under the coarse mattings of custom and all wonder prevented. It is so wonderful to our neurologists that a man can see without his eyes, that it does not occur to them that it's just as wonderful that he should see with them. That is ever the difference between the wise and the unwise. The latter wonders at what is unusual. The wise man wonders at the usual. Shall not the heart, which has received so much, trust the power by which it lives? May it not quit other leadings and listen to the soul that has guided it so gently and taught it so much, secure that the future will be worthy of the past? Well, the power of hope, the power of optimism. This is pure Emerson, and of course it is challenging. I think challenging still to us even today. Let's finish quickly now at 2A, messages and themes. Reform, of course, begins with the individual and then goes to the group. Education is based on belief for Emerson in good human nature, not evil. And finally, C, and a third point here, we know folly, we know lying when we see it. Don't try to reform me if you are broken. In other words, Emerson argues you can't separate message from messenger. The father smoking, telling his son not to smoke, Emerson says that kind of reform just does not work. At level 2B in rhetoric, notice his ironic tone. Even at the start, everyone is trying to reform everyone else instead of course, reforming self. His rhetorical questions are powerful. For example, can you believe in reform without believing in justice? Is an interesting question because, of course, it takes us to Plato's Republic and, of course, the Thrasymachon response that might makes right. But, of course, Socrates points out, well, yeah, what about 3 guys that go out to rob a bank? 2 go into the bank, the last guy stays out of the car. If the one guy staying out in the car drives away, what will the other 2 guys say? He did something wrong. Wait a minute, you're bank robbers. You don't believe in right and wrong. Clearly you do. This is the Socratic insight, right? Finally, notice the powerful word pictures. The laws of the solar system are like the laws of politics. That's an interesting idea. At 3A, in the relation to other texts, we've already mentioned Plato's Republic, his idea of the philosopher king, and the need then for the ideal state to produce the philosopher king, the importance of education. What is your favorite movie of reform and somebody who changed something by virtue of having the courage to do something? Finally, think about Hitler and Gandhi. They were both technically reformers. But notice, Hitler had that exclusivity that did not include other people, while Gandhi's inclusivity was far more powerful. Finally, at level 3B, let's try to relate this to ourselves. What is one personal reform that you can make? What is one group reform that you would like to be a part of? And finally, do you agree with Emerson that you can't separate message from messenger? Because that puts a lot of pressure, doesn't it, on you to live your truth? When I speak with teachers, I will often say this. If it's the case you can't separate message from messenger, then the students are as much watching the life of the teacher as the words that the teacher is speaking. Whoa, that puts a lot of pressure on adults, doesn't it, to try and live an authentic life? Well, speaking of authentic, that's the end of this essay. Our next one will be worship. This one will be a very challenging essay, but I think we need to be challenged, don't we? I'm thankful that you're allowing Emerson to do that. Thank you.